Hey y'all, it's the wine loving bookworm back with another book review on your Sunday evening. I apologize in advance if you hear a bunch of dogs barking in the background. My neighbor's dogs are a little crazy and I've been hearing them since I got in here tonight, so bear with me on that. All right, so let's start with the wine tonight. BOGO at Publix. It's called Ava Grace Vineyards. Let's see, they're probably California, right? Yep, California. So I've never heard of this before at all. It's a red blend. My husband told me to do that one. I got a Merlot in a red blend. He's like, red blend. I'm like, all right. So let's give it a shot. Cheers. One more time. Has quite a bite to it. I'm not sure what that is. Like a little acidic. It's okay, but it's got a bite. So I think that was like around $10 a bottle. So maybe that's why it's BOGO. I'm not sure. Not my favorite ever, but whatever. We tried it, right? All right, so let's move on to the book because I'm real excited to talk to you guys about this book tonight. I read My Absolute Darling by Gabriel Tallent. You hear the dogs? I don't know if you hear those dogs, but I was at book club last month and they were talking about this book because it was going to be one of our choices, and they were saying, oh my goodness, it's so disturbing. And she had the lady that owns the bookstore that I go to book club at had read a little bit of it, and she's like, no, we're not doing this one. So another woman there had read it and she's like, I didn't think it was that bad, So I was like, I gotta pick it up and I gotta read it, I don't necessarily like super disturbing things, but when you tell me there's this controversy over it, I've got to read it. So I picked it up. So how I feel about it was a little bit of a surprise to me, but I'll go into that in a minute. So anyway, it's a fiction book. Gabriel Tallent was born in New Mexico, but he grew up in Mendocino, California. And in Mendocino, California is where most of the book takes place. It's Northern California and it's on the coast. He went to Wilmette University and he spent a lot of time leading youth trail crews through the Pacific Northwest. So that kind of shows. He knows a lot about the natural environment up there, and that comes through. One thing I didn't like a lot about the book was just how beautifully he describes the environment. I mean, I love the Pacific Northwest. I've been there once, but I just absolutely loved it. So that was kind of a nostalgic thing for me that I loved reading about that. So that's Gabriel, and this is his debut novel, which I think says a lot about him. I couldn't find out how old he was online. I just did a quick search today. I think he's pretty young. But this book, if he is fairly young, is just amazing that a young person could write this book. So, like I told you, I was told it was pretty disturbing, and I was prepared for it to be something more than it was. And I think sometimes when you read things in a book, it's less than you see it in a movie. Like if I would have seen these scenes in a movie, I probably would have turned it off. But the fact that it's in a book maybe kind of dulls that, your visual sense of it. Like you can kind of see it differently in your head than you would a director putting it on the screen. So it is disturbing. I'm not going to say that. There are some parts in here that are just horrendous, but it wasn't quite as bad. Oh my gosh, it wasn't quite as bad as I thought it was going to be. So the basic outline, it's a 14-year-old girl. Her name is Turtle. It's a nickname. Her real name is Julia. She lives with her dad, Martin, in Mendocino in the California coast. Her grandfather also lives, they have this property. I kind of envision it kind of being a bluff where you could see the ocean, but the ocean's still a little bit away. There's land down there, So her grandfather lives on the property, but doesn't live in their house. They have this house. At first glance, Turtle is her real name. I mean, her real name's Julia. I just said that. But she's very isolated. She's very angry. She's very, snaps back at anybody that talks to her. So you're kind of like, what's going on with this girl? Right away, something's different about her. She's kind of like an outcast in her school. Her father appears paranoid and delusional. Yeah, he's very smart. He thinks there's all these conspiracies, government, beyond government, just people out to get him all the time. He was described, I think even by the author, as a survivalist. I don't know if that's the best way to describe him. I'd say very mentally ill is the best way to describe him. Survivalist, maybe, but he didn't really seem like a kind of doomsday prepper guy to me. Like, he just seemed like he had all this stuff in his head about everybody coming to get him and the government, wanting to take them away or something, but he didn't really have that, quote-unquote survivalist feel to me. He didn't have like a bug-out bag or anything like that. He seemed almost kind of like live day by day kind of guy, but he was very smart. Like, you could tell the stuff he read, the things he said. He was an intelligent guy, but he just was clearly very mentally ill. So, in addition to being mentally ill, he's an incredibly monstrous character. He is horrible to his daughter, Turtle. Now, let's back up and remember she is 14 years old, okay? He beats her mercilessly. He molests her. Sorry, that's one of the more disturbing parts of the book. He's just he's such a monster. And you can tell. There's nothing likable about him. I didn't find one thing likable about him. Even though she loved him through all of this. He was a monster. Okay, so he is the worst part of the book. He's just a monster. And it just gets worse as you go on. She is extraordinarily tough. She's extraordinarily mature for her age. You forget she's 14. She's way more tough than a 14-year-old can be, and this is who she lives with, her father. That's just a horrendous person. So, you kind of get why she would be so strong. So basically the book is about how she matures, how she deals with her father, what happens throughout her life. So that's the basic outline. There's so much to this book. I'm not going to give away a whole bunch of stuff. If this is at all interesting to you, I just thought it was fascinating. I read it within a couple days. I was done with it. I thought it was fascinating. Again, there's very disturbing parts in it, but a great book if you can kind of look past that. If you're not a person that can look past that, then don't pick it up. So let's see what my notes are. Very hard to read, some parts, but I loved Turtle. Like, I loved her. And one of the funny things in the book to me is her name's Julia, but she calls herself Turtle. She does not like to be called Julia. And she thinks she's so ugly. But as you read and you get perspective from other people in the book, you start to think she's probably pretty beautiful. Pretty beautiful. And she doesn't know it. And so she adopts this name Turtle, which is like an ugly name, right? Instead of her more beautiful name, Julia. So that kind of struck me right off the bat. Because at first you just think she's kind of like this scraggly, ugly kid. But as more people start coming into your life, you realize that's not really who she is. Her grandfather is super interesting. You want to like him because he's nice to her. He does stuff with her. He knows on some level what the dad's doing to her. He knows about the physical abuse. I think he knows about the sexual abuse too, but they don't really get into that. But he doesn't do anything to stop it. And he is a raging alcoholic. I mean, he just drinks all the time. So you think of him as like this poor old man, and man, his life's just been hard, and now he's an alcoholic, and he loves his granddaughter, but he doesn't know how to stand up to his son. But then there are some moments with Martin, the father, and his son that come through that make you think that maybe this guy was a big jerk when Martin was growing up. They kind of allude to it several times. So, maybe in his old age he's kind of chilled out, but maybe he did the same things to Martin that Martin's doing to Turtle now. Maybe minus the sexual stuff, but maybe he was very abusive to Martin when he was growing up. And, that happens. You perpetuate abuse, People who are abused become abusers. It happens all the time. I'm no psychologist, but I know that. So that kind of was an uncomfortable moment in the book because you really want to like the grandfather. You do. He's like a likable character, but there's these little things that come through and you're like, maybe he's not such a great guy. And he never tries to save his granddaughter. He knows at the bare minimum that there is significant physical abuse going on. And he kind of tries to confront his son sometimes, but it never really goes anywhere. I also read a lot of reviews on Amazon, and I get that this is kind of a hard book to read, but they were kind of down on Turtle, and they didn't really like her as the heroine of the book. And almost some of them were saying she enjoyed the abuse. I get where they're coming from with that, but I still think they're way off. I myself have never been abused, but I feel like it's more complicated than like someone smacks you and you're hurt. You're talking about your father, your parent, who's supposed to love you unconditionally, who's supposed to protect you. At the same time, you're talking about something that's been happening since she was a small kid. Her mother died when she was very young, like very young. So this has been happening for years. That's the epitome of complication, right? Like, how complicated is that for a kid? Of course, they love their father, but all this crap's happening to them, so that they don't love that. But to say she like enjoyed the abuse or she wasn't like a sympathetic character, I don't get that at all. I loved her, but she was a completely sympathetic character. I mean, let's not forget this girl's 14. Like, the way she comes off in the book sometimes is like she's much older. She's much more mature, but she's not an adult. She can't fight this guy off. She doesn't really even understand what's happening to her or 100% how wrong it is. And she loves her father despite it all. And one of the things that struck me is she's this uncanny ability to hold a love and hate at the same time for him. Like, to hold both emotions at the same time for him. And she does it a lot in the book. There's a lot of internal dialogue from her. And she loves him, but she hates him, loves him, but she hates him. And she's almost like, it's the same thing. And you want to say those are contradictory emotions, but in essence, hate is not the opposite of love. Indifference is the opposite of love. So hate and love are much more closely intertwined than we want to think. And I think this book does a good job of like showing that. This is her father. She's a child. She's a very strong child, a very mature beyond her years child. But she's a child. And these things are not easy for her to sort out. But I loved her. I thought she was great. I thought she was just... I loved her. She's exactly, the kind of person, or how you'd want a girl to respond to those situations. I mean, how much are you expecting of a 14-year-old girl in this, And some of it was so, like I said, I've never been physically, sexually abused, any of that. But he seemed so in tune with her, in her thoughts and feelings and emotions. You almost feel like the author at some point had experienced some level of abuse and knew these complicated reactions to it. That's what I felt. I mean, that's just, kind of throwing it out there. But to me, it just felt so genuine. The whole thing felt so genuine. And like I said, disturbing good book gets progressively more disturbing. I remember I was texting my mom, because she wanted me to read it first before she read it. And I said, I don't really think it's that bad. I mean, yeah, okay, there's a couple moments. And then right after that, it got so much worse. So it's difficult. It's difficult to read. And if there are triggers for you, like molestation, beatings, things like that, don't read it. But again, like I said, this is a book, so it's a little bit different than maybe watching it. I have a hard time watching that stuff maybe on a movie. But in the book, I could handle it, especially by what a gifted writer he was. And just the whole description of the physical world and the environment on the Northern California coast. Blown away by it. Beautiful. Like, you could just imagine every last thing in your mind. I love that. So overall, I would probably give it 4 out of 5 stars. I just subtract that 1 star just because it's a lot sometimes. It's hard to get through in some moments. But yeah, I would give it 4 out of 5 stars. So My Absolute Darling by Gabriel Tallent. I think if you think you can handle it, definitely pick it up because it's a great book. I didn't bring it in here, but next week I'm going to read Only Child. I can't remember the author's name. Rhiannon Navarro, I think her name is. And it deals with school shootings. So, 2 super heavy books right in a row. And for me, Only Child, I've already read it. It's a lot more heavy than this book for me, just being the mother of a child that age. So I'm going to Vermont next Saturday. We're leaving. So I'm going to try to do the Only Child review on Wednesday for you guys, because that's kind of like I got a free day that day. So look out for that then, because it'll be a little early. And I think you're gonna want to hear what I have to say about that book. So before you read it, definitely before you read it. If you've heard anything about it, watch my review before you read it. So that's all for me tonight. Again, an absolute darling. If you think you can deal with the horrendous aspects of it, pick it up, because I really think it is a great book. Ava Grace Wine, I think you should pass. Let's try it one more time just to see if it got any better. Sometimes it happens. I know it's super acidic. I would say pass on that one. Okay, well, that's all for me tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to try to make a Facebook page soon. My Instagram page has not really been working that well. I'm still going to keep that up, but I'm going to try to make a Facebook page too, so I can kind of update you guys on different things outside of the videos. So kind of watch for that. And I will see you on Wednesday when I do my review of Only Child. Have a great week. Cheers.